Hello and welcome today to the 5th episode of Beneath the Shadows. I am your host, Travis Fenn, recording today from the comfort of the Shadow Realm. Welcome to everyone who is new here. Welcome back to those who are returning. I appreciate you all so much. It means the world to me to see some ratings, to have a couple of reviews, and it's just progressing me forward and making me continue to push myself on this show. So just thank you so much for that, and the feedback is immensely helpful. The positivity is inspiring, as always. I'd like to also take a moment to just say, check out the social media pages if you haven't yet. There is in Instagram, there's TikTok, along with a Patreon page that you can go on to, and the Patreon page will start being updated with small, short episodes, maybe 15, 20 minutes, starting at the beginning of October. So go ahead and be ready to check that out. The Patreon is Beneath the Shadows. The name on the rest of them, the Instagram and TikTok, is Beneath the Shadows Podcast. And you can also send any emails, updates, topic suggestions, anything you'd like to the Gmail address, which is beneaththeshadowspodcast@gmail.com. Now, with a little bit of housekeeping out of the way, those things all wrapped up, with those things all tidied up, I'd say it's about time we take today's episode out of the shadows. Today, we head to Fayetteville, West Virginia to examine the strange and mysterious disappearance of the Sodder children on Christmas morning, December 25th, 1945. I don't know what's going on with my, I feel like I have an accent there almost. This tragedy would strike the family immensely hard, with George and Jenny, the parents, being the most devastated, understandably. Almost 8 decades later, we sit. Now, let's take a breath. Let's make sure we've gathered all the children, because damn, there's just too many. Wait, 3 of them have birthdays on consecutive days, and we'll talk about this in a minute. I can't even get the months straight. Let's take the details surrounding the unfortunate disaster and let's bring them out of the shadows. The Sodder children, numerous conspiracies, in Fayetteville, West Virginia, right now on Beneath the Shadows. We will start this Sunday by going to Fayetteville, West Virginia, a place actually my girlfriend and I just got back from as we went to New River Gorge National Park and Preserve, which has the New River Gorge Bridge in it, which is a pretty crazy thing. A beautiful little place, a small little town. As of 2020, the census, there was only 2,887 people. The population was, at least. In 2006, it was named one of the top 10 coolest small towns in America, and in 2013, it was Best River Town in 2013 by the Blue Ridge Outdoors magazine. Things to do in the area include going to the New River Gorge for activities such as rock climbing, jet boating, whitewater rafting, kayaking, hiking and biking, and many outdoor activities. It is a beautiful place through most of the year. I believe it does get pretty cold in the wintertime still, get some snow out there. Actually, I know it does because there was a ski resort right outside where we stayed. We stayed right off the river, though, which was kind of cool, in a little place called Meadow Creek there in West Virginia. Beautiful little place, walk right down to the river, right in the mountains, tucked in there, a little holler, you could call it, I guess. Now, let's get going on this crazy family and the wild disappearance of 5 Sodder children. So we'll start with the family lineage. The parents' father was George Sodder. George Sodder, he was born November 23rd in 1895, and he got married to Jenny Sodder, the mother, She was born March 2nd of 1903. They would go on to have 10 total children, starting in 1923 when they had John, their oldest, born August 15th of 1923. Joe would follow that the next year. He would be born September 4th of 1924. Marion would be third, their first daughter, who would be born March 6th of 1926. Finally, George Jr., which is interesting that it took till the third boy to have George Jr., but born September 30th of 1929. Maurice would be their fifth child, born July 8th of 1931. Martha would be 6, January 22nd of 1933, followed by Louis, December 30th of 1935. Then Jenny, September 19th of 1937. Betty, the ninth child, March 4th of 1940. And Sylvia, their final child, their 10th child, would be born March 5th of 1942. The fire happens in 1945. Sylvia is the youngest at 3 years old at that point. Like I said before, there are 3 children who have birthdays on consecutive days, which is crazy to me. Betty, Sylvia, and Marion have March 4th, March 5th, March 6th birthdays. There are also three September birthdays as well, though they are spaced out pretty nice. The 4th, the 19th, and the 30th. Kind of crazy. And then they have a couple random ones, January, December. Do they have a July and an August? January, December, July, and August. Are the other 4 there. Let's get going with the timeline, starting with when George was born in Tula, Sardinia, Italy. On November 23rd, 1895, he immigrated to the United States at the age of 13 in either 1908 or 1909. After arriving at Ellis Island, George's older brother, who had traveled with him, returned to Italy, leaving young George to navigate his new life in America alone. He rarely spoke of his reasons for leaving Italy, but he quickly found work on Pennsylvania railroads and later as a trucker in West Virginia, truck driver in West Virginia. George eventually started his own trucking business, first hauling dirt to construction sites and later transporting coal, a huge industry down in this area, from local mines. In 1922, that's when George married Jenny Cipriani, a bunch of Italian people, a fellow Italian immigrant he met in West Virginia, and together they settled into a 2-story timber house just outside of Fayetteville. The Sodders were respected members of the community, with George's business success enabling them to raise 10 children. However, George's strong opinions, particularly his vocal opposition to Mussolini, often alienated him from others in the Italian immigrant community. With 10 healthy children and George's business being as successful as ever, the luck seems like it could never have ran out. But on the evening of Christmas, so Christmas Eve, my dumbass, of 1945, tragedy would finally strike. On the night of December 24th, 1945, a fire consumed the Sodders' home. I guess it was technically the morning of the 25th, but still, a fire consumed the Sodders' home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, under circumstances that remained shrouded in mystery. George and Jenny Sodder, along with 9 of their 10 children, were at home when the blaze broke out. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children managed to escape. John, Marion, George Jr., and Sylvia, so some of the older ones, and the youngest one. But the bodies of the remaining 5 children were never recovered. For the rest of their lives, the Sodders were convinced that the missing children had not perished in the fire, but had been abducted under sinister circumstances. On Christmas Eve, 1945, the Sodder family gathered for their holiday celebration. Marion, the oldest daughter at 19, had been working at a dime store in downtown Fayetteville and had brought home gifts for her younger sisters, Martha, 12, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5. The new toys thrilled the girls, who begged their mother to let them stay up later than usual. Their mother, Jenny, agreed that they could stay up a bit longer, as long as Maurice, 14, and Louis, 9, took care of their chores, bringing in the cows and feeding the chickens before heading to bed. Meanwhile, their father, George, along with the older sons, John and George Jr., 16, had already gone to bed after a long day's work. After reminding the children of their task, Jenny took the youngest, Sylvia, who was 3, upstairs and they went to bed. Around 12:30 a.m., Jenny was awakened by the phone ringing. She went downstairs to answer it and found a woman on the other end asking for someone Jenny did not know, maybe a prank call of some sort. The woman's voice was unfamiliar, and Jenny could hear laughter and clinking glasses in the background. So yeah, like I said, maybe a prank call. Jenny told the caller she reached the wrong number and later recalled the woman's weird laugh. After hanging up, Jenny noticed the lights were still on and the curtains were not drawn. Tasks the children usually took care of if they stayed up late, so kind of weird. Seeing Marion asleep on the living room couch, Jenny assumed the others had gone to the attic where they slept. She turned off the lights, closed the curtain, and returned to bed. An hour later, around 1 a.m., Jenny was startled by a loud bang on the roof, followed by a rolling sound. So kind of like a weird Molotov cocktail type thing, possibly, fire. When all things went quiet, she went back to sleep, only to wake up once again about 30 minutes later to the smell of smoke. She discovered that George's office, where the telephone line and fuse box were located, was on fire. Jenny quickly woke up George, who then woke up their older sons. Jenny and George and 4 of the children, Marion, Sylvia, John, and George Jr., managed to escape the burning house. They desperately called for the children who were still upstairs but received no response. The staircase was already consumed by flames, making it impossible to reach them. Initially, though, John told the police he had gone to the attic to alert his siblings by shaking them even. He said he touched them, which was kind of weird, but later changed his story, saying he only called out to them and didn't actually see them. Efforts to rescue the trapped children and summon help were hindered by a series of misfortune or unfortunate events, weird things. The phone line was dead, so Marion ran to the neighbor's house to call the Fayetteville Fire Department. A passing motorist also saw the flames and tried calling them from a nearby tavern, but neither could reach the operator or the phone was out of order, which was weird. Eventually, someone was able to contact the fire department from a phone in town. Meanwhile, George, barefoot, tried to climb the outside wall of the house and broke a window, injuring his arm. He and his sons intended to use a ladder to reach the attic, but found it missing from its usual spot on the side of the house, and it couldn't be found anywhere. It would eventually be found down some embankment by the house. A water barrel that could have been used to fight the fire was frozen solid. It is the winter time, though, so you have a barrel of water that's probably going to freeze because it's cold out. In a final effort, George tried to start his trucks to drive them up to the house and use them to climb on to reach the attic, but neither would start, despite having worked perfectly the day before, which definitely is kind of weird. Unable to do anything, kind of strange, The family watched helplessly as their home burned to the ground, with apparently 5 children in it. So, with no other options, the 6 family members who had escaped could only watch as the house burned and collapsed within 45 minutes. Completely consumed and collapsed in 45 minutes. They believed the 5 missing children had perished in the blaze. The fire department, already understaffed due to the war, World War II at this point, just about to wrap up here this year, I believe it is, later this year. Or actually earlier this year, I believe. It was, June, July, September 2nd or something, the official end of World War II. Had to rely on firefighters calling each other, leading to a delayed response. So they had a little, a telephone chain. So it's like this person calls this person, that person calls this person, you get everyone going. Chief F.J. Morris later explained that the response was further delayed because he couldn't drive the fire truck and had to wait for someone who could. When the firefighters finally arrived, including Jenny's brother, they searched through the ashes in the Sodders' basement. So they arrived at 8 a.m. It was 7-8 hours later or something like that. By 10 a.m., Chief Morris informed the family that no bones had been found, which would have been expected if the children had died in the fire. So it was very, very strange and very odd that nothing was really found. Another account mentioned that maybe some bone fragments and internal organs were found, but the firefighters chose not to tell the family, which is incredibly strange and definitely not ethically correct. Modern Family, hilarious. Yeah, the show. Let's go for it. Sofia Vergara, whatever your face is. Modern fire experts believe the search was insufficient, but Morris concluded that the fire had been intense enough to completely incinerate the children's bodies, which I don't know about that. Doing bones and everything. I mean, the flesh, the tissue, all that shit, sure. But bones, they don't really just disappear in fire. So the Sodders decided not to rebuild their home. Instead, they turned the site into a memorial garden, honoring the children, the 5 children that they lost. In the early 1950s, as doubt about the fate of their children deepened, the family erected a billboard along State Route 16, displaying pictures of the missing children and offering a reward for any information that could shed light on the case. This billboard became a symbol of the unresolved mystery and stood until Jenny Sodder's death in 1989. Actually drove by this area when we went to West Virginia, drove right up the 16 here. It was very interesting to see. I saw a Reddit post where they used to live, or the area that they used to live, and it was definitely, I mean, you can't tell, it's fucking 80 years later, so it doesn't make a difference, but just peculiar to see exactly where this all took place at. Several strange occurrences before and during the fire fueled the Sodders' belief that their children had survived. George Sodder contested the local fire department's conclusion that the fire was caused by faulty electrical wiring. There was a stranger who appeared at the home a few months earlier, back in the fall of 1944, asking about hauling work. He meandered to the back of the house, pointed to 2 separate fuse boxes, and said, "This is going to cause a fire someday," which was strange, George thought. He pointed out that he had recently had the house rewired and inspected, and the wiring was declared safe. There was mention of an insurance salesman that came to the house to offer George insurance, and when he refused, the man became outraged, like crazy, angry. This salesman was referred to George by a former co-worker, Florenzo Giannutolo. Yeah, Giannutolo. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Giannutolo was the beneficiary. Giannutolo was the beneficiary of the home insurance because he co-signed on the mortgage for the Sodders, which is crazy, of which he increased from $1,500 to $1,750 before the fire without the consent or knowledge of the Sodders. He is the one who made the comments about George's house going up in smoke and his children being destroyed, and was upset about George speaking about Mussolini. So definitely some wild, crazy people who are very fascist, very Mussolini supportive. This occurred 2 months before the fire. There is no record of Giannutolo being questioned about these remarks. George and Jenny suspected arson, theorizing that their children were targeted by the Sicilian mafia in retaliation for George's outspoken criticism of Benito Mussolini, Italy's fascist dictator who had just been killed earlier that year, 1945. A little information about Mussolini, born Benito Amilcare Andrea Mussolini on July 29th of 1883. He died on April 28th of 1945. In 1940, Mussolini took his country into World War II on the side of Nazi Germany. Bad move, you stupid asshole. But soon was met with military failure, not surprisingly. By the autumn of 1943, he was reduced to being the leader of a German puppet state in northern Italy and was faced with the Allied advance from the south and increasingly violent internal conflicts with the partisans. In 1945, April, with the Allies breaking through the last German defenses in northern Italy and general uprising of the partisans taking hold of the cities, Mussolini's situation became untenable. On the 25th of April, he fled Milan, where he had been based, and headed towards the Swiss border. He and his mistress, Claretta Pettiacci, yeah, there we go. Claretta Pettiacci, I'm just done with it, terrible. Claretta Pettiacci, still questioning it, were captured on April 27th by local partisans near the village of Dongo on Lake Como. Mussolini and Petacci, I think it's Petacci, 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 were executed the following afternoon, like I said, on the 28th of April, 2 days before Adolf Hitler's suicide. The bodies of Mussolini and Petacci were taken to Milan and left in a suburban square, the Piazzale Loreto, I'm guessing, for a large angry crowd to insult and physically abuse. They were then hung upside down from a metal girder above a service station on the square. Alright, now bouncing back to the episode and the Sodders, the final weird, mysterious, odd thing that happened, the older Sodder sons also recalled something peculiar just before Christmas. They had noticed a man parked along U.S. Highway 21, intently watching the younger kids as they came home from school. Weird pedo, creepy shit like that, which could tie into one or more of the theories behind their disappearances. So when the fire department finally arrived at almost 8 a.m., they found no trace of the missing children, as stated before. The fire chief suggested that the blaze was hot enough to completely incinerate the children's bodies, including their bones, but the Sodders were skeptical. Household appliances and part of the tin roof were still found intact in the ashes, making it hard to believe that the children's bones would have been completely destroyed. All the experts the family consulted agree that more remains would have been found from the fire that only burned for 45 minutes, but in reality, the fire didn't burn just for 45 minutes. It burned all night long because the ashes were still smoldering, the coals, the embers were still smoldering the entire time until the fire department got there pretty much to reach them to put water on it. When the fire department did finally appear, it was still hot, and they had water to water down the site before conducting their search. Further, 2 hours is not close enough to do a thorough search, so the fire department kind of fucked up on that one and didn't really do their due diligence. Today, the search would take probably days, if not weeks, to conduct for a whole house fire with mysterious circumstances surrounding the disappearance of 5 children. Firefighters determined that the cause of the fire was probably faulty wiring or smoking in bed, which they didn't really think, but faulty wiring. In other words, they didn't really have an exact idea. After searching for less than 2 hours, Chief Morris ended the search for the 5 missing children. It appears he considered that this was a thorough search. The children were listed to have died from smoke suffocation. Additionally, the fire marshal wrote in his 1950 report, so a few years later on, that he once drove by and saw that George had bulldozed the site several days after the fire, and he felt that further investigation would have been impossible due to contamination. In 1948, Chief Morris admitted he did not search the remains of the house to his own satisfaction. Days after the fire, George filled the basement, and a more extensive search was no longer possible, so he filled in the basement with a bunch of dirt. Also in 1948, the acting coroner W.H. Level said that there was something peculiar about the fire and criticized the jury on its decision due to lack of evidence. Additionally, the DA Carl Vickers consulted the judge R.J. Thrift. I love all the initials. No one uses their whole fucking name. No way. And both agreed that no evidence was there to suggest that the fire had been started intentionally. Later, state police would say that they thought the fire started on the roof of the house. There are two fire marshal reports, one in 1950, one in 1952, containing significantly conflicting reports from witnesses, initially saying they did not see any remains on the night of the fire, and then later saying that they did. There was no traditional motive for the fire. The arson and the kidnapping, if that is what happened, may have been two separate and unrelated events, but that's would be crazy. Someone comes in to burn this house down and someone comes in to kidnap these kids on the same night. They're like, fuck it, it's Christmas. Let's ruin it for everyone. Revenge would probably be the most plausible. Revenge would probably be the most plausible motive, but that coupled with Chief Morris planting beef liver that was suggested to be the remains, the internal organs of one of these children's, was kind of weird. That only made it seemingly that there was some motivation of some money or blackmail, maybe, some threats. Chief Morris maybe knew more than he ever let on. It's kind of hard to say, but he definitely was involved and didn't do his due diligence when it came to investigating this fire. All circumstantial evidence points to a kidnapping and the intentional setting of a fire. There's no bones, man. It's hard to say that these children just disappeared, but it's also hard to say that they didn't probably just die in the fire, because that's the whole Occam's razor thing. It's probably what happened. It's the most obvious thing. So the Sodders continued to question the official account. They wondered why the Christmas lights had remained on during the early stages of the fire, despite the alleged electrical fault. When I was younger, we did have a house that was hit by lightning, and only half the house went out. So it was very odd because half the house didn't have electricity, and the other half was perfectly fine, which was crazy. Jenny couldn't understand how 5 children could perish in a fire and leave no bones, no flesh, nothing, not organs, not fucking nothing. She conducted a private experiment burning animal bones. This is just weird. Chicken bones, beef joints, pork chop bones, anything that she could get, to see if the fire would consume them or completely destroy them. Each time she was left with a heap of charred bones, never was able to actually destroy these bones. She also knew that there were remnants of various household appliances had been found in the burnt-out basement, still identifiable, which troubled her and haunted her for years, decades and more to come. In the spring of 1946, the family discovered a strange rubbery object near the site of the fire, which George believed was a type of incendiary device. Witnesses also reported seeing the children in a passing car during the fire, which would mean a kidnapping probably occurred, and a woman at a rest stop claimed that she served them breakfast the next morning. Other appearances, other sightings of the children: a woman at a Charleston hotel, Ida Crutchfield, saw the children's photo in a newspaper and said that she had seen 4 of the 5 children a week after the fire. The children were accompanied by 2 men and 2 women, all of Italian extraction, she said in a statement. I do not remember the exact date. However, the entire party did register at the hotel and stayed in a large room with several beds. They registered at about midnight. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the men appeared hostile and refused to allow them to talk to me. One of the men looked at me in a hostile manner. He turned around and began rapidly talking in Italian. Immediately, the whole party stopped talking to me. I sensed that I was being frozen out, and so I said nothing more. Yeah, they gave her the cold shoulder, for sure. She said they left the next morning. In 1947, George and Jenny sent a letter about the case to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and received a reply from J. Edgar Hoover. Although I would like to be of service, the matter related appears to be of local character and does not come within the investigation jurisdiction of this bureau. Hoover's agents said that they would assist if they could get permission from the local authorities, but the Fayetteville Police and Fire Departments declined this offer. Next, the Sodders turned to a private investigator named C.C. Tinsley, who discovered that the insurance salesman who had threatened George was a member of the coroner's jury that deemed the fire accidental. So some real contaminated jury, some weird crossover there, but it's also a very small town. So, people are going to have multiple roles doing things that are kind of lap over each other. He also heard a curious story from a Fayetteville minister about F.J. Morris, the fire chief. Although Morris had claimed no remains were found, he supposedly confided that he discovered a heart in the ashes. He hid it inside a dynamite box and buried it at the scene. I kind of mentioned this already, but he said he found some organs. Tinsley persuaded Morris to show them the spot. Together, they dug up the box and took it straight to a local funeral director, who poked and prodded the heart and concluded that it was beef liver, untouched by fire. Weird that Morris would lie about this and then tell the parents and go through this whole ordeal if he knew it wasn't actually an organ from a person. Maybe he thought the coroner would not be able to tell the difference. I really don't know. Soon afterward, the Sodders heard rumors about the fire chief, that he had told others that the contents of the box had not been found in the fire at all, that he had buried the beef liver in the rubble in the hope that finding any remains would placate the family enough to stop the investigation. So trying to get them to stop investigating on their own terms because of who knows what. Maybe he was being threatened by the mafia. Maybe the mafia did kidnap these children. Regarding the human heart liver found in the debris, the fire chief did not note this in the finding in his report, nor did he tell anyone at the time about this. It was tested by someone outside of Fayetteville, a funeral home director and owner, who was not given the backstory or told what it should have been. So he was kind of just, a third party who had no idea, no variance one way or the other. There were a lot of discrepancies and contradictions in official reports concerning this liver. The liver actually went home. The liver just went home. Peace out, guys. I'm out of here.
And just like that, I left everything. I dropped out of high school. See ya! I said goodbye to my girlfriend. Playa! And I left my family. Playa!
The liver went missing from the funeral home, presumably collected by garbage men, so just thrown out afterwards. He said, fuck it, it's not human remains, it's just a beef liver, we're getting rid of it. Over the next few years, the tips and leads continued to come in. George saw a newspaper photo of school children in New York City and was convinced that one of them was his daughter Betty. He drove all the way to Manhattan in search of this child, but her parents refused to speak to him. He was creepily stalking children and stuff just because he thought they were his daughters. In August of 1949, the Sodders dissented. I don't even know what that means. The Sodders decided to mount a new search at the fire scene and brought in a Washington, D.C. pathologist named Oscar B. Hunter. The excavation was thorough, uncovering several small objects, damaged coins, a partly burned dictionary, and several shards, of vertebrae. Finally, some bones. Hunter sent the bones to the Smithsonian Institution, which issued the following report. The human bones consist of 4 lumbar vertebrae belonging to one individual. Since the transverse recesses are fused, the age of this individual at death should have been 16 or 17 years. The top limit of age should be about 22, since the centra, which normally fuse at 23, are still unfused. So an age between probably 16 to 22 is what they're thinking. On this basis, the bones show greater skeletal maturation than one would expect for a 14-year-old boy, the oldest missing Sodder child. It is however possible, although not probable, for a boy 14 and a half years old to show 16 to 17-year-old maturation. Despite multiple investigations, including an excavation in 1949 that uncovered human vertebrae at the site, as I just talked about, no conclusive evidence was found to explain what happened to the missing children. Moving forward, there was the first billboard put up in, I believe it was 1958. There was a second billboard that was erected in 1960 with a reward of $10,000 offered, which is equal to $107,000 or something like that today with inflation. And then a second section was added to that billboard, calling for the removal of Fire Chief Morris from his office. It was controversial and many papers refused to print pictures of it, so there's no known surviving photos of that billboard. In 1968, more than 20 years after the fire, Jenny went to the mail and found an envelope addressed to only to her. It was postmarked in Kentucky but had no return address. Inside was a photo of a man in his mid-20s. On its flip side, a cryptic handwritten note read, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. ILIL boys. A90132 or 35," which is very odd. A couple different things people think it might be, but she and George couldn't deny the resemblance to their Louis, who was 9 at the time of the fire. Beyond the obvious similarities, dark curly hair, dark brown eyes. They also had a very similar nose, a very similar upward tilt of their left eyebrow, so a couple facial features that also were quite similar. Once again, they hired a different private detective and sent him to Kentucky to investigate. They had never heard from him again after that, though. So either something happened to him, like, if the mob was involved and he's investigating these leads, and who knows, maybe Louis is out there and someone doesn't want them to find him, so they had this PI, this private detective, killed. I don't know. They never heard from him again. I think he probably just stole their money and left. But the Sodders feared that if they published the letter or the name of the town on the postmark, they could possibly put their son in danger or might harm their son. Instead, they amended the billboard that was near their house to include the updated image of Louis and hung in an enlarged version over the fireplace. "Time is running out for us now," George said in an interview. It's so hard for me, I don't know why. "But we only want to know if they did die in the fire. We want to be convinced. Convince us, damn it. Otherwise, we want to know what happened to them." The Sodders family search for answers continued. After the second billboard was put up in 1960 and amended in 1968 after the parents received the picture of Louis in the mail from an anonymous person, George would become sick and die the next year in 1969 on August 16th. Following his death, a third and more permanent billboard would be put up sometime around 1975. They received numerous tips and leads, including a photograph in 1968, as I had mentioned, might have been 67, I have 67 on here, that they believe showed an adult Louis Sodder. Yet, each lead brought them no closer to the truth. At the end of the day, though, sometimes the simplest explanation can be the most compelling. Police reports cited by the West Virginia Times indicate that George had kept 55-gallon drums of gasoline in the basement of his house for the coal trucking business he owned. Cruikshank? Cruikshank. Cruikshank? The firefighter interviewed by the newspaper believed that this would have intensified the heat of the fire. When the Sodders covered the embers with dirt less than a week after the blaze, he said they inadvertently created an oven that would advance the cremation process. It may explain why the remains of the children were never found. It may explain why the bones were completely disturbed. Things like animals could have also gotten to him. You never know about that. I know the parents kept pretty close eye on it, but just because they kept an eye on it, just because they put a fence and a memorial garden on top of it, doesn't mean that it wasn't torn through once in a while, or, a bone was dug out here or there. George would pass, as I mentioned, in 1969 in August, still hoping for a break in the case. Jenny erected a fence around her property and began adding rooms to her home, building layer and layer between her and the outside. Since the fire, she had worn black exclusively as a sign of mourning and continued to do so until her own death in 1989. And finally, after her death, the billboard would come down. There was also a couple incidents where crazy shit, the billboard was vandalized and things of that nature. People were very rude, unfortunately. In later years, Sylvia Sodder, the youngest Sodder child that escaped due to her parents and being young enough to be carried out, and her children kept the case alive, sharing the story with new generations and continuing to seek answers to the enduring mystery of what happened to the Sodder children on that fateful Christmas Eve. That's going to wrap it up for the disappearance of the Sodder children today. This episode 5 here. Damn, we're already 5 episodes. We're going to take this and we're going to bounce from here into our main marks. So for today's main marks, we are going to talk about several other intriguing elements of the Sodder case that have fueled speculation over the years. Keep messing up a lot of words today. I'm very tongue-tied today. Very two-tongue Timmy over here. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but I'm tongue-tied to shit today. So don't bother telling me about it, because I know. Yep. Number 1, potential involvement of the mafia. Gotta love the Sicilian mafia being part of this. Get some Pellegrino, get some San Pele up in here, give me some of that good sparkling water, give me some gelato, and then, steal a bunch of children, kidnap a bunch of kids, and burn down the house. Some theories suggest that the Sodder children were kidnapped as part of a mafia plot, either for ransom or in retaliation for George Sodder's outspoken views against Mussolini there. This theory is supported by the threatening remarks made to George prior to the fire. Number 2, the role of local authorities. There have been suspicions that local officials may have been involved in a cover-up, either through incompetence or corruption. The Sodder family was particularly suspicious of the fire chief's actions, Chief Morris there, including the mysterious burial of a heart or, organ that turned out to be beef liver that had never been in a fire even. Number 3, the cut telephone line. The discovery that the phone line had been deliberately cut rather than burned raised further questions about the fire's origins and whether someone had intentionally sabotaged the family's ability to call for help. Number 4, unexplained sightings. Over the years, there were numerous reported sightings of the Sodder children, both in the immediate aftermath of the fire and in later years. None of these sightings could be conclusively verified, but they contributed to the family's belief that the children had been taken rather than perished in the fire. And finally, number 5, Jenny's vigil. For the rest of her life, Jenny Sodder tended to the memorial garden she created at the site of the fire, never giving up hope that one day the mystery would be solved. The story of the Sodder children remains one of the most perplexing and tragic mysteries in American history. It's getting old at this point, and the chances of things being solved are greatly diminished. Figuring out exactly whatever happened to these children is probably impossible by now, even with improved sciences that are crazy nowadays. The technology, forensic technology, has come, even in the past 10 years, has gone pretty fucking crazy. Despite the passage of time, the case continues to captivate those who hear it, and the search for the truth goes on. Thank you so much for joining me today on this crazy, eerie, mysterious, kind of whodunit, where the fuck did they end up episode of Beneath the Shadows. Remember to check out social media. There's Instagram and TikTok along with Patreon. The name on all of those is Beneath the Shadows Podcast. I think it's actually just Beneath the Shadows on Patreon. I'll be starting with Patreon episodes hopefully at the beginning of October is the plan. Now, please rate and review if you have not had the chance to. Please rate if you like the show, review if you like the show. And if you don't like the show, go over there, give me 5 stars. Tell me why you hate it. If you love it, give me 5 stars. It really helps move up the charts, helps me, helps the show, helps just things go a little bit better over here, and gives me a a great reason to continue doing this other than the fact that I really enjoy it. So other than that, please let me know what you think happened to the Sodder children. Please give me a rating and review and let me know what you think happened to them. You can also email about the show with updates, with episode suggestions, topic suggestions to beneaththeshadowspodcast@gmail.com. Now, next week, we will be looking at something that has an effect on each and every one of us in some way or another. I honestly didn't know a whole lot about this. I had the general concept, what everyone thinks of it. I honestly knew little about this topic before looking into it. We're going to talk about the effect, the placebo effect. What is it? How does it work? How did it come to be known? So much fascinating information surrounding this topic. I was very intrigued by it. I don't know if it's just my struggle with depression that really pulled me into this topic, or just the effects of the placebos that are pulling me into the subject, but it's very intriguing, and I'm looking forward to sharing more information about it with all of you. Thank you again for joining me today. I am Travis Fenn, and this is Beneath the Shadows. Have a great week, my shadow people.
Bow, wow, wow. Bow, bow.